Hello and welcome to In the Spirit, an artist roundtable and the wrap-up event of a year-long series of artistic works from queer Indigenous perspectives. I'm Mary Lou Oleski, Howard L. Gilman, 44, Director of the Hopkins Center. I am speaking to you from my remote work location in Lyme, New Hampshire, just north of the Dartmouth College campus. I ask that you join me in recognizing that Dartmouth occupies unceded land of the Abenaki peoples. We honor their elders past, present, and future, and recognize that our founding on this land has resulted in the exclusion and erasures of many Indigenous peoples and their stories, those located on this land and beyond. In the Spirit has served as a digital platform for stories of Indigenous peoples from a queer perspective. We are grateful for being invited to this work by senior producer Andre Bouchard, who will be moderating the conversation this evening. It's been an honor and privilege to help produce and support this work. The series began in concept in pre-pandemic times as a festival. It was originally imagined as a shared space for these artists who we have come to know over the past year to perform and create with each other and our community, together in person and with live audience. In the face of the pandemic and our inability to gather, these artists courageously pivoted their work to present on the digital stage. We've been inspired by their creativity and resilience, and tonight we'll hear from them about their experience developing work for In the Spirit and much, much more. We hope that as we move into a future where more live experiences are possible, that we will see these artists in person here at Dartmouth and in other places around the country. As always, when artists visit us, we're grateful when they have the chance to actively engage with students and faculty, adding their fresh perspectives to our learning and experiences. The Hopkins Center has been grateful for its consistent partnership with Dartmouth's Native and Indigenous Studies Department, Native Americans at Dartmouth, and the Tucker Center. We thank our partners for welcoming these artists into our community this year. With that, I will turn the stage over to Dartmouth students, Maeve Fairbanks, 22, and Hop Fellow Abby Fitzpatrick, 22, to get the program started. Thank you all for being with us.
Hi everyone, my name is Abby Fitzpatrick. I'm a member of the Blackfeet Nation in northern Montana. I'm a Dartmouth 22 and I'm studying environmental engineering.
My name is Maeve Fairbanks. I'm a member of the Red Lake Band of Ojibwe Indians in northern Minnesota. I am a Dartmouth 22 and I'm studying English and creative writing.
Maeve and I are currently in northern Montana, the homelands of the Blackfeet people.
Before we start, we want to take a moment to acknowledge that Dartmouth College is located on Abenaki land.
This roundtable features the artists who performed in this year-long series, reflecting on their work and the current state of queer and Indigenous performance in the country.
The HOP is excited to present this year's series and is excited to collaborate with partners around campus and beyond to deepen our commitment to Indigenous people.
Welcome. My name is Andre Bouchard. I am honored to host as a moderator this offering. I am the executive creative producer at Indigenous Performance Production, the co-producer of this show, along with Authentic Arts and Media. I am here to get things rolling. Along the way, I would like to encourage you to share your questions in the comment and feed them over to me as I will be able to monitor them in real time. I would like to introduce the four artists that I have today in order that they appeared in this series, starting with Landa Lakes.
Chogma, Sawachifo at Miko Thomas, aka Landa Lakes. Amente Tupelo Costenenche, Amente San Francisco, Chicasha Sea. Hi, I'm Landa Lakes, also known as Miko Thomas, and I am Chickasaw. I originally come from Oklahoma, but I've made my home here in San Francisco, which is on the land of the Rimatush Ohlone, who this is untreated land, a little bit different from unceded. It is completely untreated land here. Thank you.
Thank you, Landa. Landa did a wonderful performance earlier in the year, and you can actually access all of the performances from these performers in the links that we have here for this offering. The next performer that I would like to introduce is Snowflake, here and now.
Liasimchin Anyabu, I'm Snowflake Calvert. I'm currently in Huichin, Chochenyo Ohlone land, renamed by white people as Oakland, California. I am Yoeme from the Yaqui Nation. My ancestors come from the village of Potam. I'm also Raramuri and also Tzotzil Maya from Ixhuatán, Chiapas, Mexico, where my father and my family were born. And it's an honor to be here. Kolavaltakmek. Thank you.
Thank you, Snowflake. Our third in the series is a dear friend to me and elder who's coming to us from just north of where I am at, actually, Storme Webber.
Hi there, Andre. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you and thank Dartmouth for their invitation and support of us. Chamai is hello in Sugpiaq. I am an urban native Sugpiaq Black Choctaw Two-Spirit lesbian woman born on Duwamish territory and living here still. I have been a performer for, as I sat and prepared for this event, 42 years. So that's quite a long time to be involved with this Indigenous Black performance. So I thank you. I look forward to hearing from everyone. And again, thanks to our collective. Oh, should I say? Well, I'll say more as we go along.
Excellent. And our last but not least performer in this series was George Warren Rue DeLesslin, who can introduce himself.
Tanaki ni temp niat DeLesslin George Warren, niat ni temp Rue, ye insware, ye katabare, ye kampi sawachahere. Hawo manu, hawo nungti, hawo huksu, hawo yap, hawo sarak, hawo Dartmouth, hawo Andre, hawo nitem. Hi everyone, my name is Rue. Just call me Rue, like kangaroo. I'm a citizen of Catawba Nation. We call ourselves the people of the river. And I work in performance and education and community development, which in our language are all kind of interwoven. And I'm really grateful to be here with all these other brilliant performers. And yeah, I'm also very grateful for the spring and all of the plant life that is coming up here in Catawba territory. Hello.
Excellent. And now we are all together. And I neglected to say I am a descendant of the Kootenai, Salish, Pondere, and Ojibwe tribes, and I am currently on the unceded territory of the Squaxin Island and Nisqually people. Thank you everyone for being here and everyone for your offerings and the stories that you have told over this series over the last 8 months. It takes courage to tell our stories because they aren't always understood. And we are fighting against the swell of 400 years of colonialism, which has told stories about us for that long. And the truth is that those stories are frequently neither truthful nor are they complementary. And so rewriting the story that is told about Native people in this country is something that's going to be happening for decades and centuries to come. and that as we uncover our truth and as we reclaim the narrative that has been told about us. As we have gone through this series, each one of you has shared very deep and personal performances that have originated from your experience as a cultural individual within a cultural context. And I would like to start by offering a prompt. If there was a point in time, and this is, of course, within the context of the pandemic where everything was turned on its head, and we were supposed to meet 10 months ago in person for a live performance, and series of live performances. But all that was turned on its head, and we were sort of shunted into this Zoom land, as it were. So, you know, it sort of feels sometimes a little bit forced and that sort of thing. But were there any discoveries that any of you can share with us about your experiences during this series, just to start off with?
Well, I guess I could start this off by saying that one of the things that I found was unique with working with a digital format instead of instead of like putting it on the stage is there was so much more room for talk, for more explanatory things to be said and everything. And I don't know if anyone saw mine, but it was really long. It seemed like it was really long because there was a lot of stuff like into it. And I don't think that I would have done that if I had actually had a stage. Also, another thing that I felt like I really missed was, you know that biblical saying, iron sharpens iron. You know, I was really looking forward to getting together in person and meeting everybody, and in that way, you know, we could hone up. You know, we could get sharper as we approached our performance, and I did miss that. I missed that camaraderie, and so I think I also found it interesting to just be doing it digitally, where I'm talking into a camera instead of people. So there's not really long pauses and moments of reflection and so forth. And I think I sort of missed that when I did it. If I could go back and redo it, I would totally have like long pauses, just enough so that people can like take the information and digest it and move forward. But you get that from a live audience that you don't necessarily get digitally, and you have that one shot, get it out there, and then maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't.
Yeah, I would say like that's something that I missed as well, is having like being able to see the initial reaction of the audience, right? Obviously we had the chat that went on for my performance, but I missed seeing the faces, seeing the conversations and hearing the conversations afterwards and people's like in-person reactions. And yeah, I was really looking forward to being with all the other artists as well. But I now have material, you know, on social media that I can use on a later date. So that's kind of interesting that now I have not just one performance that happened and it was a moment, but something that can be replayed, which I found interesting.
Yeah, and for me, what I miss the most is like most of the time when I'm performing in a cohort of performers. And so there's this space after the performance where we hang out and eat French fries, you know, and like debrief about what just happened. And that's what I miss the most, is like I've done a few performances online and then it's like, okay, it's done. I close my laptop and then I sit on my couch and it feels like I'm missing what I hadn't realized was such an essential part of the experience of performance.
Yeah,
that's part of what I've been sitting with. Yeah,
I would just second what everyone said. Really missing the human in-person presence of all of you, and also the feeling as you're performing, the feeling of communication with the audience. So.
Yeah, I mean, I as a sort of producer of the series, I hear that, and one of the things that like the sort of the continuity between, you know, pieces and that sort of thing. I think as a producer, I think I could have actually done better at connecting you all sort of in the backstage area and that sort of thing. It did feel a little bit isolating, and that is something that potentially could be designed and sort of like as a lessons learned, because you know, my mistakes, I like to own them and try to learn from them, and I have made some on this in this sort of online space and that sort of thing. And I also felt like there was a, a difficulty that I felt in experiencing the timing of my culture in this space, and that sort of online culture, which is sort of a real thing, ended up being the frame, and that I was cramming sort of like performers in this sort of this digital space, and it doesn't necessarily translate because I end up as sort of as a producer and as a tour booking agent, um, e- explaining to a lot of, you know, live venues and that sort of thing, that when you get into a an indigenous room, time slows down. And like, you know, an elder might get up and talk for an hour. And you know, the kids are just running around the room, and hopefully there's food out already and that sort of thing. But there's a settling that you feel in your bones when you get into a room that's predominantly native and that sort of thing. And that's something that you know, it's interesting, like how to create that in a digital environment is an interesting question, and one that I would love to explore more and that sort of thing. I saw some people nodding their heads.
Well, I'll just jump in and say really quickly, like my tribe has been, so I'm from Catawba Nation, and my tribe has been really opposed to putting council meetings, all sorts of things online. And so like a huge benefit that I've seen from the sort of dance that COVID has required of us is that suddenly people who are Catawba, who are thousands of miles away, are able to participate in their tribal government. And so in that way, it is like really beautiful and amazing, because I'm suddenly connecting with Catawbas who want to learn their language, want to work on these food sovereignty issues, want to do all this stuff, but until this moment haven't been given an entryway. But at the same time, there are things that we lose from this format, right? Like I mean, I think we can all talk about like what it feels like to perform at a camera and a screen versus performing in a space full of humans, and how like exhausting that can be. So I don't know. I'm always in the space of like technology is both good and bad. It's about how we use them, and those are kind of two dynamics that I'm seeing in my life and my tribe's life.
Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking too, like my experiences in sort of native performing rooms, and the sort of the biggest one that I've had was with the Talking Stick Festival up in Vancouver with Auntie Margot, and this act of witnessing and that sort of thing. I just wonder how, and Margot actually did a series of offerings actually last weekend, I believe, and that sort of thing. But how do we get back to witnessing in this sort of environment? It's a good, interesting question. Yeah. So There have been a number of prompts that have been shared, including links to articles that our peers have sent throughout the through the ether and that sort of thing, including Anthony Hudson, who was part of has been to Dartmouth before, but was a part of the opening panel. Emily Johnson, who wrote an interesting piece for Medium and that sort of thing. There's this concept that's slowly advancing in circles around Indigenous performing arts in this country, around how to decolonize a space. And I would like to slide that term out to the ensemble. What does it mean to you to decolonize space?
Well, one of the things I would like to say is that right before everything shut down, we had the Weaving Spirits Festival here in San Francisco at Counterpulse, and one of the things that I loved about that one, when you talk about decolonizing, is that one of my objectives was to go out and do performances and not have to explain it. Because I think that we do so much work having to explain what we're doing and how we're decolonizing something, that it was rather refreshing. We could go out and we could give our tribal identities and so forth and move straight into something that felt like a traditional story of some sort without having to set up parameters of these are stories that we tell our children or anything like that. It's just something that just happens, and I think that's very important when you're in an Indigenous space to not have to explain everything, and that's how I see decolonization, is being able to go in and not have to explain, not have to be a teacher, just go there and be a performer.
Yeah, I want to tag onto that because I was a part of that festival, and coming out of it, I got a lot out of it as a performer and as a person, that as a two-spirit artist and performer, is that I realized through that festival that I'm not out of context. It's colonialism that's out of context. And going to these white spaces, these, institutions that upheld, white supremacy, makes me feel very tokenized often because I'm being hired as an Indigenous person, right? First, before an artist. And so going through this Weaving Spirits thing, where the majority of people watching were Indigenous, or Indigenous allies and accomplices, and going through this, realizing, I didn't have to explain anything, and what I did explain wasn't about my culture. It was more of just like, this is the work that I'm presenting, and then that was it. And it was just so healing and healthy just to be able to be my full self without having to combat, internalizing people looking at me as a brown Indigenous person, if that makes sense. So it was very healing to kind of go through that moment. And so for me, decolonizing is a process to make not just me, but other Indigenous people feel safe, other Black people feel safe, Asian people feel safe, disabled people, trans people feel safe. That to me is decolonizing the space.
I had an interesting discussion, if I may jump in on that, with my curator, the brilliant Miranda Belardi-Lewis, who's Zuni and Tlingit. And I did this solo exhibition at the Fry Art Museum, and we were thinking of texts to put up to invite people into the space in the right state of mind. And we agreed that we couldn't put a text up that said decolonize this gallery because it's a museum and it's inherently colonial. We couldn't transform it in that time. So what Miranda suggested and what we did was we put up texts which asked people to indigenize the space, to respect the relatives that were there, to respect the sacredness of the altar that was represented there, to not seek to possess the photographs by filming them or videoing them and photographing them, but to allow themselves to enter this space of Indigenous reverence. And that was what we challenged the visitors to do. So I was thankful to come to that understanding of it.
Yeah, I think what you all shared was really beautiful. And I think for me, I think the first question has to be land back, question mark, right? And to take that question really seriously, right? Not just like, oh, but we're in the middle of a metropolitan area, we can't do land back. But like, what does it mean that the land that this institution is built on might be obligated to tribal nations? And if you feel like rematriation of that land isn't possible, well then, okay, then what's the next thing past that? But with always the backdrop of land back, right? Like, I think sometimes theory can get in the way of the very real material reality of the fact that Indigenous peoples often don't have access to their lands. And so maybe in a very aggressive way, I'm asking people from these institutions to think about, do we need to give the land back?
Yeah, I also, just to add into that, I also think that there really needs to be acknowledgement too, not only of the land, but of the struggles of the Native people. Because sometimes when you think of, like, say for instance, San Francisco, you know, and when I did my opening, I said that this is untreated land because basically here in California, they say that Ohlone do not exist. So there's only one Ohlone group here in California that has state recognition, but none of the other Ohlone groups do, because they say that they're gone, they're extinct, they no longer exist. And so when you have something like that, anytime that you do a land acknowledgement, I think it's a very political statement. It's a very political statement, but at the same time, it's like, what else can you? What else should you acknowledge? Should you also acknowledge that how the land was taken, how it was stripped from the people? Can you also acknowledge the way that the culture was also taken away? You look here in California at all the mission Indians that basically were taken from their villages into missions, and there's a whole history that sort of goes along with that we look over, because we're saying thank you to the Ohlone people for letting me be here. Well, letting me be here? No. Thank you for being there so that we could take it from you, as well as your culture. And we're going to honor you today with these pretty beads. That's nice.
I agree with that. I mean, it is a gesture just to do a land acknowledgement, right? And so many theaters here in the Bay Area, like, they do it. You have these, you know, white people go up and they smile with this land acknowledgement. We're on unceded territory, and it's like, you shouldn't be smiling. Like, would you smile about the Holocaust, right, in World War II? Like, you wouldn't, right? And so, like, why are you smiling? And two, it's like, and then they'll invite someone like me, which is like, I appreciate at least you like thought to go to an Indigenous person, but like, you know, I'm Mexican Indigenous. Only one of my tribes is split by the US-Mexican border. And so why are you asking me and not actually going to Ohlone? Like, did you go to Ohlone? Because I would say more times than not, I'll tell them, I'll redirect them to Ohlone and say, here, go to this person, ask Ohlone to do your land acknowledgement, or bring them to be a part of your festival. And then usually what happens is that they don't follow up because they don't actually want to do the work. They just want to do this, like, you know, let me honor you with your beads, like Landa was saying, right? Like, I think there needs to be a deeper process in what it actually is doing.
Can I also
add on? Oh, sorry. Can I just add on one thing?
Please, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to talk a lot, so censor me if you have to. Mute me if you must.
Please do.
But I'll say this. One of the things that also disappoints me is if they do have an Ohlone there, or some Native representative, is when they sort of like come out and they do the land acknowledgement, and then they recede back into the darkness and disappear. It's like, oh, you've just taken the land away again.
Yeah. Well, I think what you just said is so indicative of something that's like kind of been stuck in the back of my mind recently, which is like that it seems like all of or most of the land acknowledgements that I hear are in the format of who were the previous owners of the land, right? Like really buying into this idea that someone is in charge of the land, some human is in charge of the land from moment to moment. Like these people, and then these people, and then these people, and now us, right? Which feels to me like the history of a land title.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious why we don't talk about the land in land acknowledgements. Like, we are the people of the river. Catawba Nation are the people of the river, not just for any goddamn reason, but because of the river, of the beautiful river that we live along. And so I don't know if y'all want to respond to this, but I'm just curious about, like, why isn't the land in land acknowledgements?
That's an amazing. Oh,
Having a little bit of a echo.
I'm having echo. Should I put in the headphones? You can let someone else know what to put in the headphones.
I'll just go really fast on that. And I think that so many people, and I will say even a lot of indigenous people, urban indigenous people, are disconnected from land, from nature. I think it's a crime that by kindergarten, in order to graduate, people don't know how to grow their own food. People don't know how to take care of animals. People don't know how to find water, access to real water, not just a pipe and a faucet, right? People don't know how to make shelter. People don't know how to make clothing. So I think basic humanity is already lost in America in a lot of ways. That's my little theory.
I mean, yeah, and the sort of I've actually written on about land acknowledgements in the past, in that there's this really very surface level piece of intent that I mean, I'm on a grant panel right now with well over 100 applicants, and the majority of these performing arts venues have land acknowledgements, but very few of them have any Indigenous presence in their season and that sort of thing. And they have very little connection to the people of the land and that sort of thing. And there's a deep misunderstanding, I think, of what a land acknowledgement is and what it was originally intended as. In my opinion, it was to combat invisibility. And somehow, for some people, it's actually manifested as a way to reinforce invisibility. Like Rue is indicating that, well, they were here, and this sort of voice from the mountains and that sort of thing, and now they are not. And that I mean, I recognize there is a time and place, but the thing is the land still belongs to us. We belong to the land, and that's the difference. That the ideas around this, I mean, my bones belong underneath a mountain in what is now called Western Montana, because that's where all of my ancestors' bones, most of my ancestors' bones are. And it's just what it is. But there's a misunderstanding. There's a difference between land acknowledgement and welcome to land. And they're completely different things. And that most people don't understand, that if you have any option whatsoever, you find a culture bearer and you enter into a long-term dialogue with them. And you pay them, you buy them lunch, you buy them dinner, you show up to their meetings, and you do the work to earn their trust, to get them to welcome you to their land. You earn that welcome. And that's how you do it the right way, in my humble opinion. So
I think that
I'm really curious what you were going to say.
It was a couple of things, because I thought, here we are as performers saying, stop being performative about land acknowledgement and decolonization and land back, because you're just showing off, and we know about showing off because that's what we do for a living. And so that was the first thing. And the second thing was, when we did Casino, again, Casino's my big project, Casino and Palimpsest. So as I began to, I've worked decades on this story, and as I began to consider that palimpsest, the first layer, Miranda caught me saying, I see the land as a being, because the first layer was the land, which was underwater. And then settlers did landfill, and the Duwamish, of course, were traveling another nation not recognized. Were traveling over this water. So those were my two thoughts. Thank you, Rip. If anyone knows, we know.
Yeah.
I just want to plug really quickly Rutherford Falls, like hilarious. And there's a great moment in there where some like hotshot in the tribe is like speaking in very like colors of the wind sort of language, and another native character is like, "I'm not a white tourist. You can't talk to me that way." And it just feels like very relatable to me.
Brilliant show, so good.
Mm-hmm. So good. I need to put that on my list. So do we want to continue working on talking about the sort of this this specter of land acknowledgement? What does it look like to you when people go deeper than land acknowledgement? How have you seen framing that works, that gives you the empowerment that you appreciate as an Indigenous person?
Well, you know what works for me is if somebody does a land acknowledgement, and then in the program there are indigenous representation within that program, because that says to me that they not only respect the idea of land, but they're also respecting the original peoples of the land, and they're pulling them into it.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
There is an aspiration that our Aboriginal brothers and sisters in Australia, I've brought it over here to do what they call a blackout. So Native people all throughout the performing arts, the space, all the tech, all the administration, all the performers, front of house, the food that's served in the lobby, the art that's on the walls, everything is Indigenous. And that is an aspiration. Hopefully the one that isn't carried on too much longer.
Yeah.
My answer.
No.
You can go, Ru.
No.
Thank you.
Please.
I'd say like my thing on like land acknowledgements that feels really good to me, or feels like there's a little bit deeper work or willingness to go a little bit deeper, is when the person that's invited to do the land acknowledgement, if they're Indigenous, or a panel or what have you, that obviously, if you get invited for like a panel like this, we had certain, topics we wanted to discuss, but it's really nice when an Indigenous person can just say what they need or want to say. And oftentimes, at least in my experience and other people that I know, they get told, you get 2 minutes to do your land acknowledgement. Well, how can Ohlone, who's like a survivor of genocide and is combating erasure culture within the curriculum of California, all schools teach that Ohlones do not exist, the mission system wiped them out, and it's not true. And so they're combating all of this stuff that's telling them that they're not alive, to stand up in front of a group of people to say that they're alive and they still exist and they're still speaking their language and doing their ceremonies. It's kind of nice when they can actually just say what they got to say. You're not really giving them a time limit. I do know, like, there is moments where it's like, okay, you don't take an hour, but also like, don't say you have 2 minutes max. Like, that's very hurtful. So I think just giving people, like, saying, hey, if you could make this happen around, X amount of minutes, great. But also, like, let the people speak,
Yeah, how can we make like land acknowledgements, Indigenous presence, more than like decor? I'm from the Southeast, and erasure is the dynamic down here, right? And the most economic activity that happens is around people purchasing what they view as decor, right? Like pottery that has been honed over millennia, basketry that is like woven with all of our resilience as decor. And so like and I think you've all given like great examples of like the ways in which it's not just framed on a wall, but it takes the time it needs to take, or it's reflective of a larger practice around Indigenous performance in these spaces. That's what I just get so frustrated with, is when I'm invited to come and do a land acknowledgement and then asked to sit down over on the side of the stage for the remainder of the time. Like, I've got things to say, if you haven't noticed in this time together, but I have things to say about whatever the hell you're talking about. And it feels really dismissive to just be like, okay, you got these 3 minutes in which you're going to speak, and then there's no other Indigenous people on the queue at all. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Chet.
So your experiences as I'm echoing, I think, as a performer. Do you have any? I know this is sharing time and that sort of thing. So, I mean, Emily Johnson wrote a very evocative piece in Medium over her experiences with a presenter, and that's been really the talk of the town in the performing arts circles for the bit of time since she wrote it. And she works deeply within sort of the idea of decolonizing spaces. But I'd like to put forward that there are, you know, there are venues who are really trying hard, but there are also venues that are very much like further back on their journey to, you know, capably engage with Indigenous spaces. Similarly, there are funding that's very much in and out of that sort of decolonized space. Are there any sort of reactions to their provocations that you would, you know, that you have regarding this topic? Because I want to give it a little bit of space, not bring it up too far into the.
Well, I mean, I think it's a part of this tremendous transformation that's going on. You know, as we're faced with so much resurgence of the right wing, resurgence of the struggles, and these instances like the story that Emily Johnson told, I think they will come forth more as we're going through this transformation, because we do need Indigenous peoples in positions of power, not just as a commodity of culture. So I think that's what that letter seemed to speak to. That's all I have to say. I don't have a lot to say.
It's a hard one.
Just jump in.
Yeah.
And just brevity.
No, it's okay. It's a hard one. Because I mean, I think that there's several things that I look at her piece and have like sort of gut reactions to, that there is a conception that even though we are bringing our culture into a space, that we're also supposed to do it in a way that conforms to sort of like the contracts that you get with performing arts, to you know, fitting things into a ticketed format, and that sort of thing, and monetizing this, and that this push and pull. Frequently, I think as Native performers, we end up making compromises that allow us to sort of more, you know, to compact ourselves. I mean, I had a deep conversation with a very, very, you know, to their credit, very open venue to having this conversation, that you know, you can't ask a Native performer to cut down the length of their performance. That that in order to embrace their story, you need to give the stage for as long as they want it.
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but it looked like Snowflake might have had something to say, so I don't want to like cut off Snowflake.
Again, no, totally. I mean,
respond.
I do have a lot to say, but I'm just like trying to figure out which part of that, because that whole letter is very complex, right? So it's like, one, to read it is very triggering, and I can go on like my experiences in theaters and contracts I've gotten, and I guess I'm talking now. So is, you know, the moment, yeah, thank you, Rue. But just, you know, the moment that theaters or any tech person finds out that I'm Indigenous, they don't even care about who my people are, none of that. They just hear Indigenous, oh, Native American, they're gonna burn sage in this theater. And it is so racist, like the stuff that has come my way. And I would say 9 out of 10 times, like this happens to me. And I usually will like find somebody that I'm working with that's on the project with me and be like, you need to be my buffer. Like, because my personality, like I will be confrontational if I need to, because I just, for myself, my own mental health, I can't put up with that. First of all, I've never burned any sort of medicine from my peoples on a stage for white people. Like that doesn't happen, right? If I do bring medicines to a theater, it's for myself, and I'm probably gonna go outside because I'm not trying to trigger a smoke alarm. Like I've owned a dance studio before. I get smoke alarms, right? Like, but then you see, I've seen so many performances in those same theaters where white performers are lighting candles and burning incense and doing all their other stuff. So it's the racism. So in that letter, I'm like, I get it. I get it. Yeah, I had one time a contract say I can't bring alcohol because they were scared, you know, bringing in a drunk Indian. So yeah, but that letter was hopeful though for people that do have the time to read it, because like you know, she said in the letter is that it's an opportunity to learn and to change for all of us to grow together. Because at least from my perspective, my point of view, my opinion is we're all here now together. I can't get rid of Europeans or anyone else that has come to this continent. And I don't necessarily want to. I don't. I want to figure out how we can live in harmony together and take care of this planet. That's just from my perspective. I think it's probably a pipe dream, but I think it's nice, right, to think that way. Because I want to be a good person. I would hope that people would want to. So it is an opportunity to learn and change. Will I ever see that in my lifetime? Probably not, but I'd rather go for goodness. Yeah. Rue.
Yeah, I think something I've been reflecting on is like, so much of the conversation around access and equity is about like who can, sorry, I got like cat fur all over my face.
It happens.
The downfall of having a beard and like a very hairy cat. So like access to the stage, right? Like who can get onto the stage, but also who is watching us, right? Like I have spent so much of my life performing for non-Catawba audiences, right? Like these opera audiences, these burlesque audiences, whatever. And like I was just in a meeting yesterday and I got to hear Suzanne Schoen Harjo talk about like speaking to the Senate and like all these amazing, like all these not amazing, but powerful and exclusionary institutions, and like how she approaches that, and just reflecting on how like much more intimidating it is for me to perform in front of my community than it is to perform in front of a bunch of strangers. But I've also had this kind of contrary experience recently where I'm working with our childcare program, and like we wrote a song in Catawba about the different birds that you see around. And it is so fulfilling in this different way in which it's not like this rarefied performance of like, I am the person who's going to perform for you this thing, but rather like this is a community performance that we can enact whenever we want to. So I'm just really thinking about like, who is this audience? What is the stage we're on? What is the utility of the performance we're providing? And I don't have any answers, but you know, if COVID's not good for anything, it's good for thinking.
That's real. That's real.
That's so real. If I can share this, something I read from Mani Chalabi, a Northern Two-Spirit relative. She has a book out, which I forget the title of, but it's wonderful. She said one of the things that Two-Spirit people were meant to do was to keep the fire going in the village. And so I think that that is a great mission statement. It's been inspiring me since I read it.
Excellent.
I told you I'm just going to be brief. I warned you. Don't look surprised at me. I see you.
That's a value. That's definitely a value. I want to honor that. So technically, we're at a point where I'm to invite more questions and that sort of thing. But we have such a great conversation going. There's a couple of things that I would love to sort of like, slide across, the virtual table and that sort of thing. The provocation right now to me is sort of a hopeful one, to be honest. And I would love to invite each of you, to talk about any sort of Two-Spirit, performers that might be inspiring to you at the moment.
I just have to give a shout out to the Everlasting Spider Woman Theater.
Oh yeah.
Who I was fortunate enough to work with in the late 90s in New York City at Wow Cafe Theater, on a production of their play, Daughters from the Stars. And I guess when we're talking about making space, I always return to the fact of how thankful I am that we were born this way, that we can prefigure reality, that we can behave just as if we are living in indigenous culture, because we are, because we are. And it requires no permission. It requires no questions. I did a poetry reading in 1998 called a poetry performance that I toured in New York and in London and Seattle, Wild Tales of a Renegade Half-Breed Bulldagger. That was in 1988. Because I came from, a lesbian mom and queer culture and grew up in lesbian bars, and something about becoming an artist, I didn't have to ask the permission. And I think every single one of us is that way at the heart of it. And I just want to say, what a joy to have this blessing, and what an incredible situation that we can be mad about funding. I never got funding for such a long time. I just did things, I'd go paint houses, I'd work on the street to make some money and go do my art, because, if you feel that you must do it, you just must do it. So I just want to say I'm real grateful for the support that we get. And, I'm thankful that we continue to evolve and grow the rightness of it. That's my next.
Thank you.
Well, I think the artist that really sort of keeps inspiring me is Ty Defoe. Ty Defoe does so much, and one of the things that I love about Ty is that when you look at how he started in theater and everything else, it started with a lot of traditional stories, and he would make like these appearances at things like the Smithsonian and so forth, and even to this day, as he continues to grow as an artist and really expand, he continues to point out Two-Spirit issues and to be involved in things that, at this point he could probably just say, oh, I'll pass at this, but he keeps rolling it out, and I think that's really great. So I love Ty. Ty's great.
I can go. I think, well, first off, reflecting what everyone else said, it's so funny because Indian country is such a small place. I feel like everyone that we mention, other people have heard of. So definitely appreciative of everything that everyone's mentioned. And particularly what Storme mentioned about just this not asking for permission. Like, I think one of the most deplorable things from my childhood was this narrative that queer people need to fight for tolerance. And like, I don't want to fight for tolerance. I'm awesome. Queer people are awesome. And we make the world better. So like, no, get on board. We're great. So I really appreciate that like sentiment that like, it isn't the state that determines whether or not we are awesome, whether we're valued, whether we're revolutionary and transformative, but it's us and our performances and our relationships that make that happen. Definitely Tai Defoe, just an amazing performer. Gio Saktama Neptune, who has been on this series, just an incredible basket maker and performer. Kim Tallbear, who I do not believe identifies as queer, but has like deeply transformed my thinking about how colonialism has changed our relationships and our families. And then Danae Aesthetics on Instagram, who is constantly like carving out space in this pan-Indigenous world to like make space for queer folks and trans folks. So
Damien.
Yeah, those are my folks.
Would that be Damien Diniaze? Yes?
No, Dinae Aesthetics is a different person, but Damien Dinae Yaze also, who's an incredible graphic designer and poet as well.
Absolutely. Amazing artist.
Yeah, I would like to actually just talk about Rosie Seamus. She's been a friend for a number of years, but I would say this past year, there was a lot of, at least 5 artist peers that I had that we either found out or came out as pretendians. And I wouldn't say that Rosie is not queer, but I'll say she's queer friendly because I don't want to use the word ally too much, but it's been really nice connecting with her over this past year, and just the advice that she's given, as somebody who's a little bit older than me, to give me advice, in performing and not exploiting myself as an Indigenous person, but celebrating myself as an Indigenous person. And if you've ever seen their art, you can definitely see that where they're telling their personal stories as a Seneca person. And then the other person that I would like to also share is my sister, Sissy Slays, who lives in Yalamu in San Francisco. You can find her on Instagram at Sissy Slays. She is from the Walker Paiute Reservation. I can't say enough about her. She's amazing. She's a curator and party promoter. She also, there's a lot of, she's big in the Vogue scene here in the Bay Area and has done different balls, but then also just shows up looking fabulous. And that's already Two-Spirit visibility, just walking down the street. So definitely check them out. Beautiful performer. Definitely has a lot of stuff on Twitch as well. They're not a drag performer, but they usually end up in drag shows doing just being themselves. So definitely check them out. Sissy is amazing.
Awesome. Could I add some of our northern relatives too, if I may?
Absolutely.
Michelle Thrush, Tawahum, young poet, Janet Marie Rogers, amazing Mohawk poet, Canada. I was fortunate enough to be part of 2 different Indigenous arts cohorts at Banff in the recent years, and it was so powerful and meaningful. And being Alaska Native, I just recognized the tremendous commonality with so many of the First Nations peoples from North, because we're from North. So and if people are interested in more information on Two Spirits, the Montana Two-Spirit Society is a wonderful resource. Listen.
So a question from the audience, or there was one that was posed a little bit earlier. I'm curious to know, in thinking about post-pandemic context, what's the work that you want, desire, wish to do that has not been possible to promote or realize in the digital space?
Well, I just look forward to real time. Like, I look forward, and I hope that we will have a chance to come together. And personally, as an older, non-technically adept performer and multidisciplinary artist, I welcome collaborations with younger people that have more capacity and I'm also, studying, so to acquire new tools.
Well, one of the things that I'm looking forward to is once again working with my really close people, especially like the Brush Arbor girls again, being able to get back together and remount some things that I want to do. I have a new thing and I want to get it out there as much as possible. And I was so sad when the pandemic hit and I wasn't able to share things with my group. So it's I don't know. I love working together because I think that we really feed off of each other's energy. So when we mount something, it's really great.
Yeah, I'm excited for the in-person cultural exchange that usually happens. Like, it's something like this. If this was in person, like the green room backstage moment, like really getting to know each other. Like it's a little bit, virtually, but something that is totally different when we're in person because you get to be present with each other. Like, you're bringing in your genealogies and your culture and whatever you went through that day. So I miss that. I miss that. And I'm excited that it's going to happen again very soon.
Yes. I miss depth and like physical interaction with the space of like being able to run up close to the audience and run back far away. And like that's what I like am. I don't know. I'm so inspired because I'm like, what is it like to be close to an audience person and then far away? I forget. So that's where my mind is right now around performance.
Yes, I miss having meals with people.
Yeah.
Food is love in my family, and that's how I express that. Also, being able to give people hugs.
Right.
So
all the things.
I mean, this connection is, I mean, as I think Rue pointed out, a moment for reflection and that sort of thing. But it doesn't take the place of connecting in person and sharing food and all the things. So we're sort of at a place where we can start wrapping up. I would like to invite anyone if they have any parting thoughts or well wishes or that sort of thing to share them at this moment.
Well,
Are you
again,
talking to us? Sorry.
Are you talking to us? I think he's talking to us. Thank you, everyone. I left out one name, Kiara Dawn from up north. And thank you, everyone. And thank you, Andre. And thank you, Dartmouth. And I look forward to when we can meet. And I'm grateful for this space because one last thing I wanted to say was that it's made a lot of things accessible to disabled people who've been asking for these options for a very long time. So I'm thankful that part of our family can access. So thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, hello everyone for having us and listening to us. My wish is that you take this as an invitation to think about how we all have our 5 different specific perspectives on what it is to be Indigenous. And that there are thousands, if not millions, of other perspectives. So seek those out, listen to our stories. Yeah. I will.
Well, I'll say that.
Yeah, I just want to.
Go ahead.
No, Landa, you go.
Okay, fine, I'll go. So one of the things I would like to leave the thought and let it linger in the air and so forth. Sort of goes back a little bit earlier to something that Andre brought up about some of the writings and so forth. Years ago, Hane Gigamas started the American Indian Theater Company. And one of the purposes of doing that was to put Native people on the stage. But it didn't just put Native people on the stage, it also put Native playwrights front and center, and it wasn't just the actors, it was the whole thing, and it was sort of like about creating like a company. And if that's something that that could actually happen for Two-Spirit people, I think that'd be really, really wonderful if we could create something much more or less like a blackout theater in some way of bringing forth two spirits in that very same direction, and being able to not only give them a chance to perform, but also a chance to write, a chance to be behind the scenes and do the whole gambit. I think it changes things. It changes the world, because Hane Gigama went on from there to create so many wonderful things that Indigenous people enjoy today. And it all started with the fact that he wasn't getting anything. And so that's my thoughts.
I love it.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to say for people, just kind of like what we were saying, is that we're not all the same. Different nations, different histories, and then individuals are different as well. And so just like being Two-Spirit, being an Indigenous artist and a Two-Spirit Indigenous artist, we are carrying our cultures as best we can, and then we're also artists. So yeah, see us for the complexities and the fullness of who we are, that, you know, we're not just Indigenous, we're not just Two-Spirit, but we're also artists, and we can create work that doesn't have to look like the Indigenous tropes of what you would want us to dress like or act like or speak like. I could perform Nutcracker and make it Indigenous. So just want to put that out there.
Beautiful.
Wukolawul, thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, guy. It's beautiful.
Well, with that lovely thought, I would like to thank all of you for your stories in this series, and your patience in doing things on this online format. It has been a transformative experience. I truly appreciate this. And I want to extend my thanks to Mary Lou, Karen, Sam, and all the team over at Dartmouth for supporting it and switching onto this online format and providing us all with, you know, I just saw your heart. At least you didn't transform into a giant kitten, I suppose. So some lens, which is thank you in Salish. And I wish you all a lovely evening, and please take care. Thank you.
Whoa.